I've been turning this one over in my head for days, and I still can't fully wrap my mind around what just happened. Picture this. The most powerful man in the world stands in front of a room full of global elites in the Swiss Alps, points at a smaller country's leader, and says, on a live stage, "Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark." And the guy named Mark goes home, stands in front of the cameras, and says, "No, just no." That's the story. Except it isn't. Because what happened in those 72 hours in Davos, Switzerland, in late January 2026, was not just a diplomatic spat. It was the opening move of something much, much larger. And the numbers in the aftermath prove it. Let me walk you through exactly what happened, why it matters, and why the real story here has almost nothing to do with who said what. So here's the setup. The World Economic Forum, Davos, Switzerland, January 20th, 2026. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney takes the stage before a room full of the world's most powerful people. He doesn't mention the United States directly, he doesn't mention Trump by name, but what he says is pointed enough that everyone in that room, including Trump watching from somewhere, knows exactly who he's talking about. Carney tells the forum that the old rules-based international order is over, that it's, in his words, not coming back. He talks about great power coercion. He talks about tariffs used as weapons. He calls on middle powers, countries like Canada, to act together. If we're not at the table, he says, we're on the menu. The room receives it like something rare, a Western leader actually saying out loud what everyone in power is privately thinking. And then Trump gets on stage the next day. "I watched your prime minister yesterday," Trump tells the Davos crowd. "He wasn't so grateful." He goes on to say Canada gets a lot of freebies from the United States, security, trade, access, and that Canadians should be grateful. Then, looking directly into the camera, as if addressing Carney personally, he says it. "Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark, the next time you make your statements." Read that sentence again. A sitting American president, speaking to the global economic elite, publicly lecturing another country's leader like a subordinate. That's not diplomatic language. That's not even close to it. Now here's where it gets fascinating. Because Carney did something almost no one expected. He went home to Quebec City, walked to a podium at the Plains of Abraham, and, according to officials in his own office, went off script. These weren't his prepared remarks. He added them in the moment. Canada and the United States have built a remarkable partnership in the economy, in security, and in rich cultural exchange. But Canada doesn't live because of the United States. Canada thrives because we are Canadian. We are masters in our own house. This is our country. This is our future. The choice is ours. Calm, direct, zero aggression, and it broke the internet. Within hours, clips were circulating in every language. California Governor Gavin Newsom told Davos attendees that American politicians from multiple states had sent him transcripts of Carney's original Davos speech. He had courage of conviction, Newsom said. He stood up. The Washington Post ran a headline that read, essentially, "Trump dominated Davos, but Carney was its star." Is this the political calculation we should all be paying attention to? I want your read on this. Drop it in the comments below. Now, Trump didn't sit quietly. That same Thursday, he posted on Truth Social. He had, apparently, invited Carney to join something called the Board of Peace, a U.S.-led council tasked with managing Gaza's post-war future, with a $1 billion membership fee attached. Trump's post informed Carney that the invitation was being withdrawn. "Please let this letter serve to represent that the Board of Peace is withdrawing its invitation to you regarding Canada's joining what will be the most prestigious board of leaders ever assembled at any time." A $1 billion seat at the table, retracted via social media post. And here's where the math starts to get interesting. Carney picked up the phone on Monday and called Trump. According to people familiar with the call, Carney described it as a very good conversation. But then, Trump's Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent went on Fox News and told viewers that Carney had very aggressively walked back his Davos remarks in that phone call. Carney's response, publicly and on record, he stands by every word. So someone is shaping a narrative, and both sides are doing it simultaneously. Bessent tells American audiences Carney backed down. Carney tells Canadian audiences he didn't. The actual transcript of that call does not exist in public, which means everyone gets to believe what they want. But here's the layer that nobody is centering enough. Strip away the rhetoric, and what you're actually watching is a collision between two fundamentally different theories of how the world should work. Trump's theory is transactional and hierarchical. The United States provides security through NATO, provides market access, provides capital. You're grateful, you're deferential, you remember your place. This isn't a new view. It's actually consistent with how American administrations have operated for decades, just usually expressed in diplomatic packaging rather than out loud at Davos. Carney's theory is different, and it's one he's been building toward his entire career. Before politics, this man ran the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England. He's not a career politician throwing red meat to a base. What he articulated at Davos is a structural argument. The unipolar world where the U.S. sets the rules is gone, and smaller countries that don't start building alternative relationships will be left exposed. The middle powers must act together because if we're not at the table, we're on the menu. That's not applause line populism, that's a policy roadmap. And Canada has been quietly, and now not so quietly, executing on it. Consider the context. Canada just concluded a trade deal with China, one that Trump publicly criticized and threatened 100% tariffs over if it moved forward. Canada is actively reviewing its F-35 fighter jet contract with U.S. defense manufacturer Lockheed Martin, with Sweden's Gripen E-jets now a serious alternative. Canada is in the final stages of a $60 billion submarine procurement process where the two finalists are German and South Korean, not American. Meanwhile, the Buy Canadian policy, which went into force in December 2025, now requires federal contracts over $25 million to prioritize Canadian suppliers, Canadian steel, Canadian content. Zoom out and you see it. Canada is methodically, deliberately, reducing its structural dependency on the United States across defense, trade, and procurement, all at once. And the Davos exchange with Trump didn't start this process. It just put it on a billboard. Now here's the part that changes how I see everything else. Because it would be easy to watch this and see two political leaders scoring points against each other. But the data says something more consequential is happening. The polls after Davos were striking. The Angus Reid Institute, one of Canada's leading research organizations, released numbers showing Carney's approval rating jumped 8 points to 60%, his highest since becoming Prime Minister in March. Leger polling showed Liberal support surged to 47%, a 9-point lead over the Conservative Party. Multiple polls confirmed a swing in the same direction. At the same time, Reuters Ipsos released numbers showing Trump's approval had fallen to 38%, tied for the lowest of his second term. Think about what that means. A sitting American president publicly declares that a neighboring country exists only because of American generosity. And the result is that the neighboring country's leader becomes more popular while the American president becomes less popular. Even inside America, polling showed 58% of Americans thought immigration enforcement had gone too far. The muscular display of dominance was not, it turns out, universally appealing. Now I want to flag something because I think it matters. Carney is not without political risk here. He leads a minority government. A snap election could come at any moment. And while his personal approval is at record highs, grocery prices are still rising, housing is still expensive, and pockets of his country, particularly in Alberta, are deeply skeptical of his government. There are voices in Canada saying, you can win the Davos crowd and still lose the suburbs of Edmonton. The international headlines don't pay anyone's rent. His conservative opponent, Pierre Poilievre, tried to thread a needle after Davos, acknowledging the emotional appeal of standing up to Trump, while warning that Canada's jobs depend on trade with America, and that the relationship will outlast one president. That's a real argument. Over 3/4 of Canadian exports go to the United States. The dependency is structural and deep, and it doesn't dissolve because a speech went viral. What Carney is betting on is that the political momentum from this moment buys him enough room to actually diversify those exports before the reality of tariffs hits. Based on what's been reported, he's aiming to double Canada's non-U.S. export share, a target that sounds bold until you realize how much of the groundwork is already being laid with the submarine deal, the automotive side agreements with South Korea, the China trade framework, and the European defense partnerships. He went to South Korea in October. He toured a German shipyard in August. He climbed down into 2 different submarines. He's been doing the work for months, while the public-facing diplomatic drama was still building. The Davos speech wasn't the strategy. It was the announcement of a strategy that was already in motion. Here's what I keep coming back to. Trump's phrase, "Canada lives because of the United States," contains a genuine argument inside a provocative frame. American military infrastructure, NORAD, the nuclear umbrella, decades of preferential trade, these are real things. Canada does benefit from proximity to American economic and military power. Carney didn't deny any of that. He said, "We built that partnership together, and it doesn't make us a dependent." That's a distinction worth taking seriously. But Trump's choice to say it in public, to say it the way he said it, to address a foreign head of state by first name on the world stage and tell him to remember that, that's not a policy argument. That's a dominance display. And dominance displays have a way of producing the exact opposite of their intended effect, particularly when the target responds with calm rather than capitulation. Scott Bessent told Fox News that Carney backed down. Carney told his country he didn't. The polling broke for Carney. Not just in Canada. Observers from Newsom in California to European leaders in Davos registered what happened and drew their own conclusions about which model of leadership they'd rather emulate. There's a 50-year play hidden inside a 72-hour news cycle. That's what I keep thinking about. Every trade agreement, every defense procurement contract, every manufacturing partnership Canada signs right now is a brick in a wall it's building. Not against the United States necessarily, but against the vulnerability that comes from having only one option. Once you've got 12 submarines, once you've got aerospace manufacturing in your own territory, once you've got steel agreements with Seoul and trade frameworks with Beijing, the next leader who stands at a podium and says, "You live because of us," will be saying it to a country that can actually respond. No, we don't. Whether Carney is the one who completes that vision is genuinely uncertain. He has a minority government, a looming election, and domestic problems that don't care about Davos standing ovations. And the United States hasn't deployed its full economic leverage yet. The USMCA, the trade agreement that shields Canada from the worst tariff exposure, is up for mandatory review this year. That review is going to be a test of everything Carney is building right now. Here's what I genuinely don't know. Whether this plays out as a real strategic pivot, or whether it's a popular moment that stalls at the negotiating table. Whether the diversification Carney is pursuing can actually happen fast enough to matter, and whether the broader coalition of middle powers he's trying to build has the cohesion and the resources to hold together when American economic pressure gets turned up to full. One thing is clear. What happened in Davos in January 2026 was not two leaders bickering. It was two entirely different visions of how the world is organized, colliding on the same stage. And right now, the data says most people watching found one of those visions more compelling than the other. Where do you think this actually goes? Not the rhetoric, the real outcome. Does Canada pull off the pivot, or does economic gravity pull it back? I want your honest read on that. Leave it in the comments.